You're listening to the Heart Lessons podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hi friends, I'm so glad you're joining me today for episode 25 of the Heart Lessons podcast. And before I introduce my guest today, I just wanted to take a minute and remind you that I would love it if you would leave a rating and a review on iTunes for the podcast. If you're a regular listener, it would just be fantastic for the show if you could leave a rating and a review. And I have an example right here of a lovely one in case you are needing some inspiration for what to write. And this is from Kay Crottle, and she writes, "Inspiring and encouraging. Each episode has given me things to think about and scripture to focus on. Love it." So all I need is just a sentence. You don't have to write a paragraph. You don't have to write anything profound. But yeah, just a simple sentence would be really wonderful for getting the show out there so more people can listen to it. So thank you, Kay Crottle, for that review. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And if you leave a review this week, I am going to make you a promise. I promise that if I ever come across a genie that offers me 3 wishes, I will let you have the first 2. I know, you're like just completely overcome with my generosity. So I feel like you should totally take me up on that offer. But anyway, now that that's all taken care of, I'm super excited to introduce my guest today. My guest today is Annie F. Downs, and she came out with a book this past spring called Looking for Lovely, which I read, and I found it just really great. I used it as devotions in the morning, when I was reading my Bible, and I just loved it. I have to say, I was actually really nervous to email Annie and ask her if she'd be on my podcast because my podcast feels kind of small, and, her ministry is pretty big. So I was actually just emailing her one day to thank her for some words that I had heard her share on a different podcast, and like a little voice inside of me just said, ask her to be on your podcast too. And I was like, oh, no, I can't do that. But then this is such a crazy flashback. I had this crazy flashback from like 7th grade health class where a nerdy boy, we were like learning about self-esteem. And it was this video where this like nerdy boy was like trying to ask out the prom queen, like to the school dance or whatever. And the video, like the narrator on the video was like, the worst she can do is say no. And so in my head, I had that flashback. I'm like, all right, well, I guess the worst she could say is no, or just not email me back. That's not the end of the world. So I was brave enough to ask, and I'm so glad I did because she was so gracious and said yes. And so today you're going to hear from her and hear all about her heart behind Looking for Lovely. You'll hear about the other books she's read, that she's written. And we chat about some of my favorite parts of Looking for Lovely, which include what it means to have a gentle and quiet spirit, and what it means to wait well in a season when you're kind of, wishing that you weren't exactly where you are. And so I'm just really excited for you to listen to Annie today and learn from her wisdom and just be encouraged and inspired by her and her journey. And so here's my conversation with Annie F. Downs. Well, hi friends. Thank you for all of you tuning into the Heart Lessons podcast today. As you know, on this podcast, I like to talk to women who are walking well in what the Lord has for them. And today I am so excited to introduce you to Annie F. Downs. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you.
I'm so honored that you are chatting with me. I don't think I've ever actually talked to somebody who's written a book that I've read.
Oh, well, there we go.
So yeah, this is very cool. So before we dive into, there's so much I want to chat with you about. Before we dive into it, will you give us all a little bit of a brief bio of who is Annie F. Downs?
Sure, yeah. So I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been here for about 8 years, and I'm a full-time author, speaker, travel and do events all the time, camps and retreats and conferences for women. I do Sunday morning church sometimes, college students, youth groups, pretty much anybody who wants me there, I will come. And I have 5 books out. My most recent one is called Looking for Lovely. I think that's the one that you read most recently. So, and yeah, so that's me. I'm currently in my office in Nashville. It's our first day back at work after a little bit of vacation. So it's kind of fun.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And then you also have a podcast.
I do. It's called That Sounds Fun with Annie F. Downs, because I just wanted to pretty much do interviews that sounded fun to me. So it's been really, really great. I totally love it.
I love that. I've actually heard, I've listened to some Hope Writers podcasts and a little bit from Emily P. Freeman. And she always quotes you. She's like, Annie F. Downs says, chase the fun.
That's right. I'm a big believer in it. I think fun is probably underappreciated in our little world. So I love having fun.
Yeah, as soon as you take the fun and the joy out of it, it just becomes a chore. So who wants that?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that most things, as you know from reading Looking for Lovely, I think most things probably have a fun side to them or a beautiful side to them that we don't necessarily see right away. So I like to look for that.
Yeah, well, that's good. So your most recent book, Looking for Lovely, did it come out this spring? Was that when?
Yep, it came out in April.
Okay. And like I said, I just finished reading it somewhat recently, and I actually was using it as like a devotional. Like in the morning, I would read my Bible and then kind of read a chapter, and I don't know, it worked really well that way.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
I loved it, and to me, I read it as like a call to slow down and see God in the small moments. And, it says collecting the moments that matter, which I feel like that's kind of what I was trying to get in the practice of. Like, I can see God not in the big things, like quote unquote big things, but also in something small that's happening in my life, or take the time to like worship Him while I'm like doing my dishes or something like that. So is that sort of what you were trying to communicate to the reader? Is that like the message you were trying to get across?
Yeah, there definitely is that. That is 100% true. There's just this need for us to kind of look at the lives we already have and see where are these moments, like you said, even doing dishes, where you sit down and you think or stand up and wash your dishes and think through like right. What's actually beautiful about this and what's actually worth remembering about this moment. And I know that sounds a little bit Pollyanna and whatever, but the truth is my life has been radically changed by the idea of recognizing that the Lord always has something good for us, even on the worst days. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it certainly changes your perspective on a lot of things. And so yeah, I mean, the idea of like slowing down and seeing your life right in front of you and seeing even that washing dishes, like, wow, I love my kitchen. And gosh, we are able to afford food for our family. And I remember when we bought these dishes and why they matter to me. There's just all sorts of little moments like that we can choose to have if that's the life we want.
Yeah, God has been working so much in my heart. I feel like what I've been blogging about recently is this phrase that keeps coming to mind is moving from a sense of duty to a sense that God delights in me. And stopping to enjoy those little moments or see Him in those moments is helping tremendously. Like, I can see He delights in me because, like you said, the dishes that we have were a birthday gift, and I can, I don't know, that sort of thing, just seeing that He delights in these moments. So it's been really good for me. So
good. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so how many books have you written total? I know you just said it. I missed it.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I have 5 under my name, and then 2 that I have ghostwritten or co-written with people.
Okay. Well, the ones with your name on them, would you like kind of give me a little summary of the title, who you were writing, like the audience you were writing for, and what they can expect to find from each of those books?
Sure. Yeah, so the first one was called Perfectly Unique, and I wrote Perfectly Unique actually before I was even trying to write books. I literally was just writing a Bible study for the high school girls who were gathering in my house anyway. A lot of times people ask me, like, how do I become a writer? How do I do that? And I kind of go, or they'll say, tell us your story of how you became a writer. And I'm like, well, there were a bunch of high schoolers at our church that came to my house on Monday nights. And so I literally was just serving the students that were already in my life, So I kind of just say to people, like, plug in where you already are and watch God open other doors,
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my story. That's how I started, is I was writing for high school girls. So 6 years after I wrote the book, it got picked up for publishing. Yeah. And after we'd gotten 47 no's on that same manuscript. And then one day we got a yes, and it was crazy. And so Perfectly Unique's the first one. Is for teen girls, probably like middle school, high school age girls, but there are a lot of college girls that read, and a lot, which I think this is great, like a lot of times moms will write me and say, I was leading my daughter's friends through this small group, or I lead a group and we were going through this small group and are going through Perfectly Unique, and I wish I'd have read it when I was 16. And I'm like, guess what? I wish I'd have read it when I was 16. Like,
right.
Because it's about how really Perfectly Unique is how God made you on purpose. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And so each chapter is a different body part, kind of going through from head to foot about what it means that you were made on purpose and for a purpose. So that's the first one. And then the second one is called Speak Love. And it is about the power of words. Because if I saw one thing after the first book came out and I was traveling around and speaking to high schools and college groups, and there was one thing I saw consistently across the board with youth pastors, with parents, is everyone wanted to talk about the mean girl and talk about how cruel young women are with their words. And so I decided I wanted to write a book about that, about what it looks like to use your words differently, and what would it look like if we all chose to speak life instead of death, to speak love and speak kindness. And so the first part is how you talk to God, how you talk to others, and how you talk to yourself. Those are the three parts of the book.
Okay.
And so I love that one too. And then there's one called Speak Love Revolution that's kind of a 30-day journal that you can do while you're reading or after you finish Speak Love, that kind of is like the next level of like, now what do we do? Right?
Like putting it into practice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in the book. But the journal is just like a 30-day, the real focus is, what do we do now? You know, how do we actually live this? So then Let's All Be Brave. And so, Speak Love is for middle school, high school, college girls. I wrote it when I was leading a group of girls that were college students. So it reads a little bit older than Perfectly Unique.
Okay.
And then Let's All Be Brave is my first book for adults. And it is about everyday courage. What does it look like to, what does it look like to go after the brave thing in the life you already have? I think a lot of times people think in order to be brave, they need to create a whole new life. Like, okay, if I'm going to be brave, then I need to do these 12 things that are totally different than the life I already lead. And I would actually say that courage is being brave in the life you already have. And so that's what Looking for Lovely is about, is my story of moving to Nashville, my story of moving from Nashville to Edinburgh, Scotland, and kind of how God showed up for me in all those places and in all those ways. And so that is Let's All Be Brave. And then the most recent one is Looking for Lovely, about what happens when you want to quit, right? So the covers, Let's All Be Brave is blue, and Let's All Be Brave is khaki, and Looking for Lovely is blue, because I wanted them to look like day and night. Like I wanted them to, that's how I wanted it to be. I wanted it to people to think like, oh, these look like day and night, like they go together. Yeah. And because Looking for Lovely kind of picks up from where Let's All Be Brave left off, and is like, okay, so then what happens? Then what happens when things don't go right, or when you try to be brave and it doesn't go the way you want it to? What do you do next? Yeah. And so that's Looking for Lovely.
And you just had, I was following you on Instagram, the Looking for Lovely weekend. How was that?
Yes, it was so fun. So here's what we decided to do. We decided that because so much of Looking for Lovely is set in Nashville, so much of it is like how Nashville has been a big part of my healing and how God has changed me. And so what we decided to do is we thought, man, wouldn't it be fun if we could just invite all of our friends who are readers to come and see some of the best parts of Nashville to me, right? I want them to actually see these places that I wrote about. And so that's what we did. We just had a whole weekend where we went where I had some of my favorite musicians come in, like Post Monroe, who's a great new country group, Meredith Andrews. They came and sang to the women who came. And then we also had like some of my favorite companies here: Fashionable, Compassion International, A Glimmer of Hope Candles. Some of these companies that I love are based here in Nashville. I had them come as well on Friday, and then Saturday we got up and did a bunch of the things that are in the book. We went through 12 South, we went to Radnor Lake, we did a BFAB workout class, which is like my favorite workout class in Nashville. The teachers came, and it was crazy fun. We had the best time. It was so fun. So it was a great weekend. It was everything, excuse me, it was everything we'd hoped it would be, where people made new friends and people left with tons of great new memories, and they hopefully encountered God and encountered some new things about themselves that they didn't already know.
Yeah, so it was basically like a walking tour of your book, of Looking for Lovely, essentially.
About half of it. We didn't do everything, so cool. But we did a lot of it. So yeah, it was just like, remember when you read, like we went to the coffee shop where I wrote Looking for Lovely and Let's All Be Brave.
That's so cool.
And I was like, look, here it is. Like, remember where I talked about this and this? Here we go. You know, so it was really fun to kind of show these, 150 women who came from all over the country, kind of show them like, look, here is what you already read about. You already know this place. Yeah. And so that was super fun.
It sounds so fun.
I know. I think we're going to make it a thing.
Yeah, like an annual.
So
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's just great. People love coming to Nashville. There's tons to do here. And I love hosting people. And so it's really fun when people, already love the book, already feel like we're friends because of our life online and because of what we're doing on social media and because they've read the books. And so they already feel like we're friends. And so for them to get to come here is really, really fun.
That's awesome. I have to say, after I read the chapter on the Ryman Auditorium, I immediately Googled what was available to go get tickets for. Because I'm like, that sounds like an amazing place.
Yes, so the best part is that's how the weekend ended. Is we went to the Ryman, and that night, we had 40 VIPs who had decided that they wanted this extra part in their weekend, and they stayed. Dave Barnes, who's one of my dearest friends and an incredible musician here, had his first headlining show at the Ryman.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just it was just a perfect storm for that weekend for someone that they already know from the book, that they know from all my, list on Spotify, that they know, every book I've ever written has had telling people to listen to Dave. And so for them to get to hear him live the first time he ever headlined at this place that they already knew from Looking for Lovely, it was just really awesome.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Well, I loved the Instagram pictures. I know that's kind of like living vicariously, but it was fun to follow on Instagram at least.
Yeah, good. We wanted to be. I mean, when there's only 150 tickets, there's a lot of people who want to come that don't get to.
Yeah.
And so we wanted people online to see what we were doing and feel like in some ways they got to be with us a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think it felt that way. I caught on the excitement. It looked super fun.
Oh, good.
So, well, I want to back up a little bit and talk about your story of how you got here, because actually the first time I ever heard you speak was on the Surviving Sarah podcast, and which I love, by the way. If you have never listened, you totally should. And I was so encouraged by what you said, during your conversation, because I have my own personal writing aspirations, and I feel like it's just going to take a long time to get there.
Yeah.
And so you said people will come up to you all the time and say, like, I want to be, where you are. How do I get there? And you say, look, like, I used to be a teacher. Like, I wasn't always like this. So that was just really encouraging to me to see that, it's a process. And then you, like you said, you did not get that book contract the first time you tried, not even the second time. And so, would you just sort of walk me through that journey and just speak to, like, kind of what it's like to live in that process?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, you're exactly right. That's when I went to the University of Georgia. I studied early childhood education, and that was really my goal, to teach school. For this opportunity to write kind of opened up to me, and I like you, I had these dreams and hopes that someday I would get to do this as my job. And but I taught school for 5 years, and then that last year is when I was writing that study. And at the end of the year, it just kind of felt like, man, this may be my chance to really pursue this. And so for me, that looked like going to writers' conferences, meeting other writers, putting my writing out there on my blog, writing a ton for free. I mean, there were tons of magazines that paid me nothing for the first few years, but that's how you have to get out there, because you have to build some sort of audience that publishers will go, okay, there's someone who will buy this book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a long, like I said, I wrote Perfectly Unique in 2006, and we didn't get a book contract for it until 2011. And actually, we self-published it in 2010 because we got so many no's, but the book was finished.
Yeah.
I just thought, well, I'd rather go ahead and publish it and have it done and at least say, one day I published a book, and look kids, look grandkids, Grandma wrote a book one time.
Right.
And once it was already done, that's what I thought. I just want it to exist. And then, because my readers on my blog and social media were very kind to me, it sold well enough that it caught the eye of a publisher.
Okay.
Who had already said no to us, actually. Zondervan had already turned us down once. And then after they saw how we were able to sell books, they were like, oh, never mind. You guys want to talk? And it was a great relationship. I love Zondervan. And so, yeah, I mean, it was just from 2006 to 2011 is when we tried to get published. And then after 2011, it's still, even though I'm writing books and being published, you still experience so many of those emotions and feelings and working through all of that. Yeah. So it is a long journey. And, you have to, wisdom says, as soon as you can, figure out what your lane is. Mm-hmm. Figure out who you are and what your lane is and what matters to you and where you feel like God's called you to. Because there's so many women who do this job, but I'm not like any of them. We're similar in a lot of ways, but I'm really different. So I spend my time trying to be someone else who's writing books and writing Bible studies, that I'm actually never going to do my own ministry. I'm just going to constantly be doing everyone else's.
Right.
That was a real game changer for me when I realized, like, okay, this is kind of my lane and this is who I am, and I need to be open to that.
Well, so how did you balance, all the times that you got so many no's? How did you know that you should keep pushing, or that it was like God closing a door? How did you discern what you should do?
It was really hard because I am not sure. Mm. I was never totally sure which was which. I didn't know when a door was closed and when it was just time to pause. So when we got all those no's in 2010, and when my agent and I had an agent at the time, I hugely recommend having an agent because it really is a game changer. It's the defining difference, I think, for a lot of people between a career and getting one book deal.
Yeah.
But when my first agent and I parted ways, and we had gotten all those no's, that felt like a closed door to me. And it needed to. I needed to process through some things at that time about, what it meant if I wasn't an author. If I had moved to Nashville and was pursuing this thing and it didn't work, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And so I needed to do that. So the Lord knew I needed to walk through that. And so that was really important. And so for me, I really genuinely thought the door was closed. I thought we were done writing books. And then I just wanted to self-publish it so that we would have one. And that just kind of reopened the door a little bit. And I went, oh, maybe I should pursue this. And after I moved to Scotland and moved back home and had gotten the offer from Zondervan, I went, oh, okay, well, that's an open door.
Right.
When Zondervan calls and says they want to give you a book deal, that's an open door. And so,
right.
I lived like the door was closed until the Lord showed me different. And a lot of times I live like the door's wide open until the Lord shows me different,
Yeah.
So for now, I'm living like this is the career of the rest of my life. Everything me and my staff at the office do, we do like this is my career for the rest of my life, because that's what the open door looks like right now. So, but I think it's really important that when it looks like a door is closing, you have people speak into that with you. You kind of look at it as emotionless as you can and go like, okay, I've tried to get published, or I tried to get this job, or I tried, and my friends think I need to move on, and I think I probably need to move on, and maybe I should move on.
Yeah. Sort of like gosh, I'm going to get this verse totally wrong. In the multitude of counselors, there's safety.
Yeah.
You surround yourself with the people who are kind of watching and yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. I think if you make all your decisions by yourself, you're probably doing it wrong. There's way more to life than just making your choices on your own. If you think, well, nobody gets me, nobody understands, I'm just going to make this plan or do this thing, and people just don't understand, and you go, it's probably not exactly how it is. You probably just don't like the answer.
Right.
So, which is fine and fair, and I get it, but if you want to live a wise life, you need to get other people speaking into your life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of my favorite chapters in Looking for Lovely was the nail polish chapter.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And you talked about sort of how your nails, like, are a barometer of what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
Like, if they're all chewed up, you're kind of feeling angsty and anxious. If they look fine, but they're not polished, then you're just busy, which that made me laugh.
That's right.
And then when you take the time to get a manicure, then you're feeling good. You're feeling like peaceful on the inside. You're feeling like your life, you have it in somewhat of an order. And the verse that's sort of the theme for that chapter is 1 Peter 3:3-4, to not let your outward appearance be your focus, but rather the gentle and quiet spirit within.
Yeah.
And you've also said in your book, you are a self-identified extrovert and loud laugher and loud talker, and just like a big personality.
Yeah, so, I'm all those things.
So certainly that verse can be misinterpreted to think that like a Christian woman should be like seen and not heard, or just too quiet, not opinionated. Don't, sort of just serve everybody around you, and don't have your own thoughts, opinions, whatever. And that's certainly a misinterpretation and very false. I don't think that's what it's communicating at all. So how do you, as like you said, you're like, I'm just loud. I'm Annie. If I'm awake, I'm loud. So how do you, what does a gentle and quiet spirit look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is significantly more about your insides versus your outsides.
Yes, like it's not about decibels.
Right, that's right. And growing up, I really thought it was. I grew up a Christian, and I grew up in a Christian home, and grew up going to church and youth group, and every time I heard that voice, I thought that's never going to be me.
Yeah, and that
I'm never quiet,
be.
I'm never small, that's just not me. So I never connected with that. I never understood it. And then as I grew up and started to like really understand the Bible for myself more and get more teaching on it, and I started to realize like, man, a gentle and a quiet spirit has more to do with your connection with the Lord and how you feel about the life He's given you and the place that you're in, far more than your volume.
Yes.
Right? And so that's, I mean, that is what changed me. I started going like, oh, this is about my insides. This isn't about my outsides. This is about like how I feel, what's in my heart, what's going on in my life, versus this fear of like, oh my gosh, I'm so loud. The Lord's never going to make me like, I'm never going to be right for Him because I'm so loud. And that's not how He works.
No. Because He created all those parts of you and He loves them. He delights in them.
That's right.
Yeah. So how do you practice? Like, what is part of your active practice of having a gentle and quiet spirit? Like, what habits do you have?
Yeah. So I keep a a dry erase marker in my bathroom, and I write notes on my mirror all the time.
Okay.
Of like whatever I read that morning in scripture or that stood out to me, or I listen to a lot of sermons on podcasts when I exercise. And so a lot of times I'll come home from Radnor or from wherever I've gone and walked, and I will have a phrase that stuck out to me, and I'll throw that on the mirror. And it's just a way to keep, I think the way I keep a gentle and quiet spirit is to keep that constant connection with me and the Lord, a constant communication, a constant feeling like the thing I want most is to know him better.
Yeah.
And that keeps, and so then when things feel like they aren't going right or aren't going well or aren't going the way I thought they would, it doesn't matter, because the main thing to me is that connection, and I trust that God is for me and that his ways are good and right, and I have to find that in the circumstance I'm in.
Another chapter that I loved was the one about the watermelon seeds.
Yeah.
And, the theme of that chapter is sort of the verse, Psalm 126, 5 and 6, about sowing in tears. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. And so you talked about, you've cried a lot of tears over your singleness.
Yeah.
And so I wrote down a little quotes from page 83 of your book, and he said, "I love my life and I'm so grateful for all I have, but it certainly isn't the kind of joy that makes those tears seem tiny. But then slimy watermelon seeds. I have to cling to the truth of what will become of those slimy watermelon seeds." And I feel like I'm in a similar circumstance that in the last 3 years, I've lost 2 full-term infants. And the Lord has opened up so many amazing opportunities, like this podcast included, for me to share my story, share more about the Lord and what he does in your pain, and reach out to women in similar circumstances. But like you said, like somehow the joy of that doesn't feel the same as the tears that I've sown.
Right.
And so, same for you. So practically speaking, how do you live with that deferred hope? Like what, with someone who feels like they still are sowing these tears and they haven't quite seen the reaping of joy. Like how do you practically live with that hope deferred?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, I think it's just the reality of calling it what it is.
Yeah.
Not pretending like things don't hurt, not pretending that everything's fine, not pretending that, well, if God's good, then I don't feel pain.
Right.
And that's just not how it is, right? Like,
no.
It's just not how it is.
Mm-mm.
And so I think that's a big part of it, is calling things what they are, calling pain what it is versus pretending. And so that really matters to me. So that's probably the biggest one to me, is feeling your feelings and calling them that. And then also so for me, a lot of times I have to look and go like, okay, God, what is the joy that we're reaping here?
Yeah.
Because the math of that is true. The scripture is always true and the Bible is always true. And so what is that truth that is hidden in there that if we sow in tears, we reap in joy? What's the joy? And I just keep asking God to show that to me.
Which is part of looking for lovely. Like you're,
Right.
the joy, the lovely, you're finding all these blessings.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's so good. So what would you say to somebody then who's like, I can't be happy or joyful in this moment because I don't have the job, the house, the kids? Like, what would you say to somebody who's kind of feels like they're in between and really struggling to find joy in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is you need to tell people that. Someone else needs to know that, because otherwise you're probably drowning in it a little bit and circling in it. And you don't have to. It doesn't have to be like that. And so I think it's inviting other people in. I think it's being honest about your feelings with them. And I also think it could be as simple as starting a list every day of what is just one thing that's good about the situation you're in. Like just one thing. You don't have to come up with 100 things. You don't have to come up with a list of 1,000,000 things. Just like, what's one thing? Have you, and I'd encourage people, I wonder if you have read 1,000 Gifts by Anne Foster.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's that lifestyle of going like, it feels like there's no good here, but there has to be. There has to be. That's the truth of it. There has to be good here. And what is it? And that's what I think will change your life.
And in that book, I think what I was so challenged by is how specific she was with her thankful list. Like, I remember one thing that she wrote down, like, because she put little samples of her list of 1,000 gifts in the book, and one of them was toast piled high with jam. And I just remember thinking, like, well, that's super simple, but like, certainly there's a million people in the world who don't have that.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
and just realizing that you can get really specific with your thankful list.
Yeah, that's right. And finding, I mean, it doesn't have to be these big, like, you know, look, there was $1 million in my bank account and there was only 12 yesterday. You know, like it doesn't have to be massive things. It can be everyday things, just like you said.
Yeah, it's so good. So this is the Heart Lessons podcast. I ask everybody, the last question I like to ask is, as you move forward with what the Lord has for you in your life, what's a heart lesson that he keeps speaking to you, like kind of an anthem or a heart song that he keeps speaking to you to keep you, you know, moving along on the path he has for you?
Yeah. Currently, we're talking a lot about trust and change.
Okay.
Like, what does it look like to trust God when you're in the middle of change and when you're trying to process through change? And so my life isn't massively changing right now, but there are just some small changes that are leading to bigger changes. And so then you have to go, okay, what does this really look like? And how do I do this? And so that's really what we're doing is, what does it look like to trust God when things aren't static, when they're different every day?
Mm. Well, this was a lovely chat, Annie.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so sweet of you.
I actually wanted to ask you, you started a hashtag I found lovely.
Yes.
On Instagram. So can you tell me a little bit about that and how we can kind of join you in that?
Yeah, that's super fun. I'm easy to find on the internet. I'm Annie F, as in fancy, Annie F Downs everywhere. And what we started doing on Wednesdays was kind of like pulling up some different topics and asking people, like, show us the lovely that you found, that whether it's a sunrise or a meal or a friendship or your pet, whatever, what is lovely to you? And it has been so fun to see that I found lovely hashtag in such a huge variety of pictures. And it's been really fun. People can go on Instagram or on Twitter or even on Facebook and look up the I found lovely hashtag and see just so many different pictures. And it's so encouraging on hard days to scroll through and go like, oh my gosh, look at all this lovely stuff that people have found that they're willing to share.
Yeah. And do you have maybe you mentioned, maybe I missed it, do you have like a different topic every week, or how does that?
Sort of, yeah. We try to have a little bit of variety.
Okay.
Based on whatever we come up with kind of in our in the office. We kind of go, this week, what would we like to see people do? Let's see breakfast, you know, or whatever, you know. So, it's really, really fun. So it's kind of whatever, like this week is going to be just like a random show us whatever you think is lovely. Okay. But then other weeks we're really specific, like show us fruit or show us your shoes or, you know, kind of whatever comes to our minds.
Yeah, that's super fun. I posted one time, but I'll need to get better with that. I feel like I know the week that you did the food, I like looked at my dinner, I was like, I could take a picture of this. It's not a very pretty picture though. It was
See, but it still would have been lovely. You still could have done it.
I should. I won't be as hesitant next time.
That's right.
Well, thank you again, Annie, for joining me this afternoon, and it was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it was great. And thank you for having me, Sarah.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Annie. I think one thing that I took away from chatting with her are a few different times she mentioned the importance of having community and the importance of, you know, bouncing ideas off of trusted friends and people that you consider wiser than yourself. And I'm pretty introverted and pretty, self-reflective, I guess. And so I tend to, when I have a problem, I just kind of think about it, you know, in my own head a lot. And I think it can be really helpful. It was just a challenge to me to think about who could I involve more, you know, in my thought processes when I am struggling with something. So that was just a really good challenge for me. And I also loved what she said about, you know, when you're going through something that feels really heavy, to just call it what it is and be honest with yourself. And then again, just find a trusted friend that you can admit it to as well. And they can kind of help you work through it. So Annie, you're wonderful, and I'm so glad that we got to chat. If you aren't familiar with Annie or, you know, the things that she does, you can find her, as she said, anywhere online, Annie F. Downs. And of course, as always, you can find show notes to our episode on sarahrieke.com under my blog. And I'll link to, all of Annie's social media and some of the things that we chatted about today. And as always, friends, I hope that you were encouraged today and that you were able to come away with a heart lesson of your own to help you draw closer to the Lord. Bye, guys.